Dinner party is a nice thing. Especially now, after we spent so many nights during virtual happy hours, remote concerts, breakout Zoom rooms. I don't know about you, but over the last couple of years, I attended virtual weddings, virtual funerals, virtual baby showers. Virtually everything was virtual. What did I wish for during those virtual months? Well, sure, I wished I could go traveling again. I wanted to sit in my shade, sipping my latte beneath the awning of a famous cafe. I wanted a waiter to give me a reprimand in a language I could barely understand. I wished I could go traveling again, of course. But in fact, what I really wanted during those long and isolating months of social distancing was just to go to a good dinner party. To talk loud, laugh loosely, meet someone new, swap stories with some smart people. Well, last month, just as I was getting ready to go out of town, to go traveling again, finally, on a short European tour, I found myself at a dinner party in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn. This was one of my last days in town before heading out, and it was just the kind of event I had been craving. An eclectic group of folks gathered around a table, enjoying ourselves, luxuriating in our togetherness. And my hostesses that night were people who always play great music, elegant music, the kind of music that belongs to the lives we aspire to live. And as I was carrying on at the dinner table, I suddenly tuned into the music. There was a version of Antonio Carlos Jobim's Aguas de Marzo. The arrangement was faithful to Jobim's classic duet with Elis Regina, but this was something else. Someone else was singing it, someone with a knowing wink, a hip flair. And it was being sung not in its original Portuguese, but in French, which gave it a slightly more cosmopolitan feel. Look, here's the thing. Some people believe in the idea of a guilty pleasure. I guess that's something you love, but you don't want to admit you love. Maybe you think it's bad for you to love it, or that it'll make you look silly. I don't know. If such a thing really exists, then for me, I suppose my greatest guilty pleasure is the song Aguas de Marzo. I mean, I've already made it clear to my wife and daughter that if there's ever a question about what to play for me in the future, like maybe I'm so old I can't remember who I am or whatever, just play me Aguas de Marzo. There's something about the elegance and the simplicity of the rolling melody, the ongoing cycle of the chords. It's a song that seems to suggest so much and pretends to do so little, but it is deep, is perfect. I admit probably half of the songs I've ever written have been an attempt to write Aguas de Marzo in my own way. No wonder so many great artists have been called to that song. There's the Elis Regina and Tom Jobim version, that first one that I loved. But then João Gilberto, Eliane Elias, Milton Banana, the San Andreu Jazz Band from Barcelona. Oh, Rosa Passos, check her out. Celso Fonseca, Mark Murphy, Luciana Souza, Cassandra Wilson, Art Garfunkel, Jane Monheit, my pal Anya Marina, Natalie Dawn from Pomplamoose, Rosemary Clooney and John Pizzarelli, Sergio Mendes, Olita Adams, Al Jarreau, Susanna McCorkle, and of course whoever this was that I was hearing at my dinner party. So there I was in Bed-Stuy, suddenly very aware of this French version of my favorite song. I got up from the table to explore, found my way to the source of the music, and discovered that it was Stacey Kent. Stacey Kent, of course. Man, I thought I got to talk to Stacey Kent, because clearly she knows some things that I want to know too. I looked up her itinerary right then and there to figure out when and where I might catch her, only to discover that we would be performing at the same club in London, the legendary Ronnie Scott's, at the same time just a couple of weeks later. She did the early show, we did the late show. And that's how we came to be here today, you and me and Stacey and her husband and musical partner Jim Tomlinson. But before I forget, welcome to The Third Story. I'm Leo Sidran. Stacey's story is really pretty incredible. She grew up in New Jersey, went to college at Sarah Lawrence in New York, then found her way to England to go to graduate school. But what she really went to do, though she may not have known it at the time, was to meet and fall in love with a young saxophone player named Jim Tomlinson. Together, the two decided to become professional musicians. Together, they created the sound and the musical world of Stacey Kent. Together, they made over 20 albums. Together, they won awards. Together, they traveled. Together, they sat for this conversation that you'll hear today. I didn't realize it when we started to talk, but it became clear to me almost immediately that if you want to fully appreciate the music and the life of Stacey Kent, then you must also speak with Jim Tomlinson. What had been clear to me, in the way she chooses her material, the poise and the dignity of her performances, the thoughtfulness of her presentation, the fact that she sings fluently in multiple languages, that Stacey is a very literate person, that literature and words are important to her. So maybe it was only a matter of time before some literary type would appear in her world. And in her case, it came in the form of the Japanese-born British writer Kazuo Ishiguro, who started out as a fan of Stacey's, something that she discovered when he played her version of They Can't Take That Away From Me on the BBC radio show Desert Island Discs, and she happened to be listening.
The way you hold your knife, the way we dance till 3. The way you've changed my
In our conversation, Stacey tells me the story of how she and Jim befriended Ishiguro, Isha she calls him, and how Jim and Isha began writing songs for Stacey to sing. In fact, one of the first songs they ever wrote for her was called I Wish I Could Go Traveling Again.
I wish I could go traveling again. It feels like this summer will never end. And I've had such good offers from several of my friends. I wish I could go traveling again.
This year, Stacey and Jim are on tour along with pianist Art Hirahara, presenting their latest record, Songs from Other Places. We spoke in the break between an afternoon matinee show and her evening show at Ronnie Scott's. You can hear the staff resetting the room, the hum of the hospitality in action. We sat at a table, masks on, because, as we talk about at the start of the conversation, Stacey and Jim are very serious about staying careful on the road. Here we talk about why she's a fatalist, escaping from the bounds of category, her journey from Jersey girl to cosmopolitan crooner, and crossing borders in multiple senses of the phrase. The Third Story is made in partnership with WBGO Studios. Visit third-story.com for the full archive and all the fun extras. Visit patreon.com/thirdstorypodcast to support the show, and visit wbgo.org/studios to find out all about their exciting and award-winning content. Here's me, Stacey Kent, and Jim Tomlinson talking the talk at Ronnie Scott's earlier this month.
We've been on the road since March.
Yeah.
We're jamming 2 years into a few months. We started in March. We were in America, and we were going from states that were good to states that weren't good, to Canada, which was scary because we had to take the test to get back into America just to take the flight to Europe. And then we've just been crossing border to border. We've been in, 12, 13, 14 countries now since March, and every country is different. The numbers are different each place. And it's really intimidating, and we're just trying to stay in a little bubble, the three of us, so that we're okay. And it's funny because everybody's got a different attitude.
Completely.
Like I walked into one place, and one of the owners, a promoter of a venue, said, "Why are you still in a mask?" And I said, "Because you want me to be here.
Yeah.
You want me not to have had COVID, so I didn't have to cancel your gig." So there's this strange kind of perception. I won't say attitude, because nobody wants to get COVID or give it to anybody. But there's a perception like it's okay. And the three of us are going, it's so not okay.
Well, that is interesting. We're just sliding in here, by the way, Stacey Kent. I'm sorry.
No, don't be silly. It's totally fine.
Because venues like local patrons want to be done with it, right? And on the other hand, as you say, in order to provide talent to local patrons, we have to remember that this is still very much going on.
Ronnie's wrote a phenomenal letter to the people who were attending.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just one of the best letters I've ever seen, where it was just so articulate. And they said, we know that this isn't obligatory, and we know that everybody wants to be past this, but just know that, if you come and you wear a mask, what you're doing is paying it forward in the same way that the people from the Netherlands, et cetera, were doing it for you tonight, so that our artists could be okay.
Yes.
And we so appreciated that because, they said for artists, it is on the road, it is different right now because we got to get in and out. So knock on wood, everything's okay so far. Yes. But you're right, it's intense and it's intimidating.
You mentioned you've been on the road since March and that you're squeezing in 2 years of canceled gigs and tours that didn't happen going all the way back to 2020. And I thought, as I sat at the bar watching you play just now, that of all of the venues to be in with you and to be talking to you and all of the cities to be in, that this is such a great place to connect with you because London is kind of where your career started and that this club must have been a huge part of your early development. So to see you here, of all places, gave me a sense that I was kind of watching, an ongoing story between you and Ronnie's and the city,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, and it's funny because you walked in today when I was just, gushing about Ronnie in those early days because we were, now I've always done that, but we were absent for 2 years. And so the intensity of coming back to London after all that time when I did start here, and, on so many levels, there's so much history here because, I met my husband, I met Jim in Oxford. I was a kid in England messing around with her master's credits in her back pocket going, what am I doing? Am I going home? Am I continuing my studies? I met this guy. I have a huge crush on him. Am I going to hang around? And then I ended up at the Guildhall School of Music and everything that's happened has left me with this slightly fatalistic attitude because how on earth did I find myself, I'm married to a person not from my own country, and I think that makes you think, how did I end up here? I mean, everybody probably asks that about their lives at some point, of course.
But have you been asking that along the way, or did you take some time recently to reflect and ask, how did this happen?
Well, I think that it's just I'm more acutely aware of it. I probably was always asking it because it could have so easily just not have happened because I did end up in a foreign country. And so that gives you that kind of sense of objectivity, looking in on your life over yourself and going, if I hadn't made that flight on that day and that call, maybe I wouldn't be here at all. I might have asked different questions than had I met somebody, back in Colorado where I was living or something. But the last 2 years have certainly made all of us reflect in that quiet on so much, right? About what we're doing and where we've come from and certainly where we're going and what we want from life. For us too, it was a matter of, because I work with my husband and we tour and we're happy on the road together, it meant that we asked the questions about home life less. And it afforded us the opportunity, because we were lucky enough to, be okay through that period, to say, it would be nice to have a home life and some routine. And as banal as this sounds, houseplants and, things that just grounded us a little bit more. And so we started thinking, well, let's record from home more and let's, consolidate the tours and go out and then go home and spend lots of time, in between at home. Let's maybe not run quite so much.
So moving forward, it has reset your thinking a little bit or adjusted it.
Yeah.
Well, I think it has for, it's tempting to, I'm glad you're here too, Jim. It's tempting to think that we're going to go back to what was before, but we can't. Nobody's going back. We can't go back. The people that we're performing for don't go back. Nobody is the same 2 years later. So neither are you in terms of the way you think about touring or recording or anything.
No, and I think everybody's this way right now. And yes, it's very easy to just kind of forget and fall back into old habits. But then again, it's funny. There's a song that I sing that we recorded for Songs from Other Places called Les Voyages. It's in French. It's a really wise lyric by this poet / composer called Raymond Levesque. And you can use it metaphorically because it talks about when you go on a voyage. Now, for him, it's voyage, right? But for us, we all went on this voyage. It's inevitable. You can never look at anything the same way again. You just can't. You've been changed. And we've all been changed. Ah, les voyages au rivage lointain,
aux rêves incertains, que c'est beau les voyages qui effacent au loin nos larmes et nos chagrins. Mon Dieu, ah les voyages, comment vous fûtes sage de nous donner ces images.
And so even if we fall back into habits, because habits are easy, there's still going to be that little alarm bell, the little siren ringing saying,
ah les voyages qui mûrissent les cœurs, nous ouvrent au bonheur, que c'est beau les voyages. Et lorsque l'on retourne chez soi, rien n'est comme autrefois, car nos yeux ont changé et nous sommes étonnés de voir comme nos soucis étaient simples et petits.
we're very happy going along the way we are. But of course, we've missed out on certain things, and that's okay too. But it gives us a chance to go, let's fix the balance. Let's improve on the balance here, because we are missing out. We have been missing out on kind of a home life. And now I think we're longing for more of a home life.
And yet you are out here presenting a collection of songs about travel and about what I imagine was probably the nostalgia for the exotic, for the place away from home while you were at home.
Yeah, just to be out. The truth is, I think we would have made this album, or this kind of album, with or without the pandemic, because I tend to be attracted to these kinds of songs anyway. When Ishiguro writes me lyrics, they are so often about that feeling of unrest. And so I think I was very much in an element, a place that I already belong, and a place where my fan base, the people who come to see us, they like to go there with me. When I first met Ishiguro, when Jim and I first met Ish, and we really just connected, it was phenomenal chemistry. As everybody listening knows, you know, sometimes you just meet people in your life and it's kind of like it's you. You know, you've known each other a long time. You share a sensibility.
Were you aware of his work? I understand he was aware of your work and selected your music among his favorite albums or something like that.
Yes. Well, here's what's uncanny, and I think this is what's so wonderful about the story. This is what's such a thrill about our collective story, the three of us. And as I was saying, because the four of us are so close, Lorna, who is Isha's wife, it was just one of those really powerful, immediate connections, like friends you've always, people you've always been friends with. And I think it really makes sense in the full circle sense of the story that we would have this friendship because there's just shared sensibility. So I was such an enormous Ishiguro fan when I found out that he was a fan of mine. He was one of those writers for me who, you know, there are lots of books that you read and you love them. And then there are those books that you read that are just set apart where you feel like, wow, that writer just said it as I'm feeling it, but I never would have been able to articulate it that way. And that's how Ishiguro was for me. Before I met him, I had already read 3 of his novels, and they were so meaningful to me. He played us, as you pointed out, on Desert Island Discs, the BBC radio show. And, you know, for people listening in, celebrities, people from all walks of life get interviewed about their life, but also you get to know a little bit more insight about them because they say if you were alone on a desert island, what 7 records would you take? And he took me. And I think he recognized something in me that made sense to him. And vice versa.
Well, you both, I mean, he came earlier than you did, but you both aren't living in England, but not from England originally.
Exactly, and I think that is a huge part of the story. So I wrote to him via the BBC. I wrote to the BBC, to Desert Island Discs, and said, "Hi, I'm Stacey Kent." I was already on the BBC a lot, so it was a very easy way in. And I said, "I'm Stacey. He just played me on Desert Island Discs. Could you please send this message to him and ask him to reach out to me?"
I mean, did you hear it in the moment? Did you hear it when it happened?
Literally in the moment.
Huh.
And I'd been on Desert Island Discs before as somebody's selection, but not somebody who meant so much to me.
Yeah.
So that knocked me out. So he got in touch, And we became friends.
Yeah.
And one of the things, early on, I mean, this man has just such insight into people. And this is why his dialogue is so phenomenal. He just gets the human spirit. And I felt so understood.
Yeah.
He ended up writing some liner notes to an early record that I made in 2000. And there I felt, again, just so understood. And as we were going along in this friendship, and by the way, there was absolutely no question about, in the early stages of us writing music together, there was nothing there. We were just friends for many years, maybe 7 years, which I think is kind of a great part of the story too, because we were getting to know each other. We were just enjoying one another's company and sharing thoughts and ideas. And there was no sort of feeling of being intimidated by this phenomenal, formidable writer, who might have walked into my life that way. We were already just good friends. And so it made sense because he kept saying things. I keep saying it made sense because everything just makes sense. This is why I'm the fatalist, right? So early on, he would say things to me like, I see you as a traveler. He got me because he too was in that same position. Now his was way more profound than mine in that Ishiguro's story was that his family came from Japan to England. He was only 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
His father had a research job here. And the family always kind of lived with the suitcase by the door as if next year they were going home. So imagine you're growing up in this foreign country far from home. And also it's not from Europe to Europe. It's all the way from Asia to Europe.
Sure, you really stand out.
So here's this little boy from this Asian family, from this Japanese family, but growing up as an English boy, right? And year after year, it was always, we're going home. But they never went home. So that's going to leave you a particular attitude of the sense of being never quite settled.
Sure.
And yet having tremendous insight into two different places. And so I think when he met me, there was a real understanding of me because my personal story was I went to college. I went to New York, to Sarah Lawrence College in New York. And the family story became Stacey never stayed long enough even to have a dinner. I graduated May whatever it was. And the next day I was on a plane to Europe. So I fled. And I was always kind of feeling like I was going home, but I wasn't. I never did. Well, I did many, many years later. And so we recognized this in one another. And he said, I see you as this traveler. And we would talk about the free-falling feeling of being away from your home and never feeling like you were home. And yet there's this kind of nice feeling about not being settled.
There's something seductive about it.
Yeah. And this objective view of your own home because you see it from afar. So you can see the kind of threads and the very strong connection there.
Yeah.
So when he started to write lyrics for me, I have to repeat, I just felt so incredibly, intensely understood. So to have these two people, Jim's writing the music, and they have such great chemistry, these two. And it just flowed, but that was never an intention. It was just one day at dinner or lunch. They said, let's write a song for Stacey back in 2006. And it was kind of, okay, let's do this. And then we started to talk about vocabulary, and off we went.
Let's you and me go away to the Ice Hotel. The Caribbean's all booked out, and it's just as well. Once I'd have been much keener on Barbados or Antigua, but just now I think the Arctic will suit us well. Let's you and me go away to the Ice Hotel.
It really, to me, presents a question as a singer and an interpreter of lyrics. It's such a great case study, right? Because anybody who starts to sing the Great American Songbook or the great songs, to me there's this question of, well, what is your relationship with those lyrics and those songs? You have to stand in front of an audience, as I just saw you do, and really embody these lyrics that you didn't write, but that you are the kind of ambassador of it in those moments. Now you've got, on top of that, you've got these songs that are sort of bespoke and written for you, and they're not your words, but on the other hand, they really kind of belong to you. It's a pretty unusual, I think, relationship as a contemporary jazz singer to have these songs that are written for you that you didn't write, but that are sort of meant for you to sing?
Well, I think there are two things here. It's really interesting what you say. There are two things that I grab onto immediately as you speak, which are, one, you know how I said earlier, when I would read Ishiguro novels, because I grew up reading.
Yeah.
I read literature and poetry, and I never wanted to write. When I went to Sarah Lawrence, I was studying comp lit, languages and literature and poetry. I never wanted to write myself. I just wanted to read. And yet I would find writers to whom I just connected so profoundly. And so you feel like it's your story.
Yes.
So that's something that I think that I'm good at, you know, because
seeing yourself in the story, in the words of others.
Kind of like an actor who probably reads, you know, dozens of scripts that show up on the doorstep, and they'll go, that's a great part, but that's not me. That's me.
Yes.
Right? Here's a little history that kind of helps, I think, feed this. My mom taught literature. And she was very pro reading aloud. That was a really important factor for her in terms of absorbing literature. And so when I was a kid and I was tiny, but not tiny, I mean, I could read, we read a lot of classics at the house. And we would all take turns reading. So I grew up reading stories aloud to my siblings. And so Dickens was a big one. There was lots, but Dickens was one. And I would read aloud to my mom and my siblings. And I knew very early on that when I read it, it was different from anybody else in the house who read it. Even though it was Charles Dickens' writing, when I delivered it, it was my way. And I knew this so early on that I could deliver a story and make it my own, even though it wasn't mine. And so I think that was very helpful, because I never feel like I sing a song and think, oh, well, you know, a million people have sung this and Ella Fitzgerald sung this, how do I do it? I feel like, of course it's mine, because my cocktail of who I am is going to be different from every other person on the planet. And so I love my songs, I live them, I embody them. I can't sing anything that I'm not totally crazy about, that I want to sing night after night after night. Same story. Because if I may just add one more thing, when we play, and I'm the singer, which means I'm singing a lyric and I'm singing a melody and I don't stray far. And yet they come alive and come off the page, because when we play, now you've seen us as a trio, sometimes we're 3, 5, 6, whatever, or orchestra. I see us as one collective. I'm not the one sitting at the piano. I'm not the one playing the flute or the sax. And yet we're one voice. And so if everybody's doing what's idiomatic to them in that role, it's my role too.
Yes.
So I don't feel like there's any kind of need. I've never wanted to write. I just want to sing the song. And that's it.
Have you heard anyone else sing the Tomlinson Ishiguro songs? Have you heard other interpretations of them?
Yeah, sometimes people reach out and they'll say, I want to cover that song. And so, I don't know people's names off the top of my head, but people have covered the Ice Hotel, and I wish I could go traveling again. And so they're just very, you know, you can always just do a little search. There are various versions of people.
And what is that like for you as the original interpreter of the songs, to hear them?
Oh, it's really fun. I mean, I love that. People write us a fair amount and say, you know, can I get, we haven't heard recordings, but they'll say, can I have the song, the sheet music for that? And so we're very happy to just send it out. You know, there's no charge for it or anything. They'll just write. And if they find us, like on Facebook or any social media, we just press go and send them a PDF. And we're happy to see the songs out into the world. It's funny you should say that, because we're very good friends with a lot of the people who are the next generation down from Jobim. Right? We never met Jobim. But all of the kids right below him, that sort of second generation, that second wave of bossa. So Dori Caymmi, Edu Lobo, Marcus Valle, Roberto Menescal, these guys are good friends of ours, and they tell us zillions of stories of Jobim, who was like just the pop of all of them. And because he was so prolific, and because they were writing as well, and they would talk to him sometimes with their questions or their neuroses or their anxieties. And he was very chill about the whole thing. And I think that one of the aspects was that people weren't always happy about their song being sent out into the world and not played the way they wanted it to. And Jobim's thing was, you know what? Once you send a song out there, it's not yours. Not just for the people who are playing it, but also for the people who are listening to it. If you send something out there, whoever is sitting in that chair listening, they're participating.
Yeah, that's right.
It's theirs. They can think about it how they want. It's sad, it's happy, they can vacuum to it, they can drive to it, they can listen to it in a concert hall. You know, he had a very healthy and open attitude. And I love hearing those stories because they're so affirming. I'm very happy for people, as is Jim, as is Ish, for people to just take these songs and be playful.
Do you think, you talk about the questions that you ask, what if I hadn't come here? What if you hadn't met Jim? What if you had chosen not to come here when you did? What if you had chosen not to stay? I mean, do you think you would have decided to sing and be musical if you had gone back to the States or stayed in the States?
I certainly wouldn't have sung.
Really?
I can really answer that question. And it's such a sliver of a chance. I was always musical.
Yeah.
I grew up musical.
Yeah.
I mean, as a musician, it's hard to... Okay, it runs in your family.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, it doesn't run in mine. My parents, to put it, kindly and gently, because parents do make their own decisions for all sorts of reasons, and there's like a statute of limitations on that. You can't sort of question it. My parents were very much in charge.
Yes.
And it took me to run away in order to have the independence that I wanted to have. Now, I didn't run away to go sing.
Yeah.
I ran away just to get away.
Yeah.
But had I been under their control, I don't think I would have had the guts, and I don't think I would have, I don't think I would have done it. But I was always this musical kid. I mean, we would go to the movies as a family, and I would come home, and I would sit at the piano, and I would just tap out the incidental music that I just heard. I was good at retaining it. My friends at school would ask me to sing for them all the time. I was known as a singer, but not like, and I say this a lot, it was not like I was some dramatic, show-stopping, performing singer. My friends would turn to me and literally ask me to sing in their ear in a very quiet, whispered, intimate, tender sort of a way. Mine was a soothing kind of music that I would deliver to my little girlfriends who just had a little melancholia and wanted their friend Stacey to sing to them. That's what I was known for as a little kid. And no, it's really not that far-fetched from what I do now, right? So it was always in me, and I think I would have had a musical life because I can't help it. I hear things and I'm attracted to them, and music is my life, but I probably would have gone down a different path. And no, I wouldn't have done this. So that's why I think I talk about the fatalism so much, because if I had not gotten out of America on that May whatever, and I think I probably would have been a frustrated musician.
What did your parents think of the decision to become a musician and to stay here?
Well, at first, there was a lot of pushback. When are you coming home? Why aren't you home? And it was from my parents and my grandparents. And, I was lucky because I was so far away. And it wasn't the kind of day we have today because there was no social media.
Yeah, that's right.
They couldn't get me, right? So I could stay away without them, on me or on the phone or, the way your parents can text you today. But we would check in and they would say, when are you coming home? And they didn't take it very seriously. Jim was a graduate of Oxford in a degree called PPE, which is Philosophy, Politics, and Economics, and then left college to pursue a life in music. Had we not met, that might not have been Jim's path either, but I think that they had a hard time believing that their kid who was dating this guy, they didn't know we were married, and we were married in secret for 3 years before we told them. That's what I mean about the kind of controlling aspect. I just couldn't tell them. But I married Jim in order to stay in England and not get kicked out because I had a student visa in those days. I mean, we knew we were going to spend the rest of our lives together, so it was a legit marriage. Yes. Totally legit. It was love at first sight. Yeah. But my parents didn't take it seriously. Oh, you're just messing around. Oh, you'll grow up. Yeah. Come back. I'd already started my master's. I mean, they thought that I would go and pursue something more academic. Yeah. So they didn't like it at all. And then they kind of got hooked because I did a gig in New York, and
Sure.
they came, and they saw people liking me. And I did that film, Richard III,
Yes.
with Ian McKellen, and there was an opening, and they came to that.
Come live with me and be my love, and we will all the pleasures prove that hills and valleys, dales and fields, and all the craggy mountains yield. Come live with me and be my love.
And so they started to kind of get interested, like,
Yeah.
oh, what's she doing? But it took a while to convince them. I don't think they took me very seriously.
Yeah.
And now they love it.
What a story, yeah. Over and over I hear that so much of the Stacey Kent experience as an artist is really a story about the two of you.
Yeah.
And it's a story about, a few versions of a love affair, a musical love affair and a personal love affair and choosing to become professional musicians together. It sounds like you made that decision kind of in tandem.
Absolutely. And then there was just the emotional side, the sort of personal side that we won't go into. But, Jim really he saved me. He saved me from a lot of things. I think I would have been sadder there had I stayed for a lot of different reasons. And so I wasn't looking for that, but I found it.
Yes.
And when we met, it was definitely one of those, oh, it's you. I was looking for you. I didn't realize I was looking for you. So this is why the pandemic was so interesting in terms of everything stopped.
Yes.
Everything was still. And we all started to look at our own stories of our lives. Yeah, so it's multi-layered. And then musically, we just had such great chemistry. We were from very different worlds.
Yes.
Our backgrounds were different, right? We grew up listening to different kinds of music, and yet we shared a lot of same loves. So we both loved João Gilberto, but, I was listening to Hall & Oates and Jim wasn't. So, it was all...
I was listening to Hall & Oates, too.
So, it was interesting because we both fed this collective with different vocabulary, and I think that made it interesting, too.
Just as a digression, you mentioned during the show that I saw today that Ishiguro was the one who asked you to sing the Paul Simon song, American Song. And I think that is a brilliant request. And I think that kind of song suits you so well. And it's, again, a challenge for singers to find songs to fit this kind of context that are outside of the long, extensive, but still sometimes limiting book of songs that we all know. And that was a brilliant choice. I could see how you could actually bring more of this music that you were listening to as a child into the repertoire. I think it suits you.
Many's the time I've been mistaken, and many times confused. Yes, and I've often felt forsaken, and certainly misused. But I'm all right, I'm all right. I'm just weary to my bones. Still, you don't expect to be bright and bon vivant, so far away from home, so far away from home.
Well, thanks. I mean, I think that I stopped thinking about the category that I was in because I could, and I'm relieved because it would be silly to limit yourself to a genre just because that is the genre. A couple of things. I loved the American Songbook, and I grew up on it. Fred Astaire and Rosie Clooney and, Barbra Streisand and Frank Sinatra and Perry Como. They were all so meaningful to me. But so was Paul Simon and Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young and Carole King. God, what a genius.
When you're down and troubled and you need a helping hand, and nothing is going right, close your eyes and soon I will be there to brighten up even your darkest night.
You can't deny the thread along the way. You find things along the way in your life. The Beach Boys were huge influence on me. Yeah. And so they're in my music regardless. And what's fun about doing this trio, though, is that it's so pure that it can just be about the song, and there's really no question of category. I mean, the way Art plays, the way Jim plays, we're clearly jazz musicians. Yes. That's how I like my harmony. And this is why I play this as opposed to, folk music. But Paul Simon is so meaningful to me, and that's such a profound song. And you're right, that was a brilliant choice by Ish. And this is what I mean about
Yes.
I mean, he gets me so well.
Yes.
And he said, that song is so you. And they're not that far-fetched from the stuff he writes me.
Yes.
It's sad, it's melancholic, it's weary, it's harsh, and yet it's so optimistic, but resigned, and it's all of those things.
I think it also resonates knowing that you have lived so much life away from America. That for you to sing that lyric, even if it's just a subtext, it resonates.
Yes, I think that's a really interesting aspect. But then again, anybody, especially, now, look what we're living in.
Yes.
Look what we're living through. And Paul Simon wrote that at a particular time, and everything is cyclical, and we are living in a particular time. And it's meaningful to return to that song. It's so funny about the cultural influence that I've had by living abroad.
Yes.
I've moved home, so now I live in the state of Virginia. We left here a long time ago. So the formative years were here, and then we were here a lot.
And then you went back.
Yeah, we were here a lot because we were doing so much European work, and it just made sense to fly in and out here kind of thing. But we didn't actually, once we sort of got going on the career, we didn't spend that much time in England because we were out and about. So our off days, if you put it this way, our head was on the pillow more in Colorado than it was in England, because whenever we were here, we were touring.
Right.
And when we were in our off time, we would be home.
Right.
But we recently moved to the state of Virginia.
So do you feel that your career is sort of an international career? Do you feel that your career is more anchored on one side of the ocean than the other?
So I'll do a tour in America, and then leave, and then come out into the world, the rest of the world. We like traveling. We like being part of the world. We count our countries. We're somewhere between 55 and 60 countries now. And that makes us feel really good and proud. I think it's a real privilege to be part of the world. But at the same time, that's a very interesting question right now, because I would like to travel less, as I said. And now that we live in Virginia, rather than the middle, we lived in the middle of nowhere, Colorado. We did not live in
Denver.
No, we were about 4.5 hours, follow the Front Ranges and keep going. And we lived in really rural parts of Colorado. And but now that we're in Virginia, we're thinking, wow, we're 2 hours from D.C. We can drive everywhere. I have this desire to be home, or I think also, we're thinking about the flying, the difficulties with flying, the world and climate and global warming. And we think, wait, why are we on all these planes? This is disastrous. Let's stay home and grow our vegetables. So you can't help but think that these days.
It is a reset. Like we said, it does change the way we think about things. And the internet, we connected. You came on stage tonight and said, thank you for your messages. I've felt connected to my audience through these years. And we are connected. I mean, I used to absolutely demand that I talk to everybody for these interviews in person. Of course, that was impossible. And I learned wonderful conversations with people, on the phone.
Yeah.
I still choose this if I can, but, we've all learned.
Yeah. But to be connected, I mean, if there's one thing that's come out of this, Jim and I were luckily fine during the pandemic because we were in the middle of nowhere, Colorado, and there were days we'd just wake up and we'd go, this is so creepy because we're reading these numbers.
Yeah.
People are dying all around us. This is a horror show.
Yes.
We don't want to be inured to this, the fact of these numbers.
Yes.
This is a horror show.
Yes.
And yet we can wake up, look at the window, see the Rockies, have breakfast, do some music work, meet up for lunch, And it was creepy how normal it could feel.
Yes. I feel the same way politically in a strange way. What I felt when Trump became our president was, this is what it feels like. All those histories that we read of all the countries around the world that lived under strange political circumstances. And you think, well, how did the Spanish put up with Franco for so long or whatever? Well, you still wake up and have breakfast. The sun still rises and sets. It's a very strange feeling to know that the world is not as it should be, and yet life is still kind of happening regardless of this pandemic around us or this political chaos or whatever.
Yeah. And yet at the same time, for those of us who were really pretty despondent that Trump got in and, went, oh my God, our Supreme Court, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Jim and I one day a few years ago, saw this thing, because the internet is fun for this kind of thing too, connecting with people and then also just the things that show up on social media. And there was this video somebody had made. It's a while now, so I probably won't get it exactly right. But it just cut from person to person to person, and they were just screaming. They would wake up and scream, and then they were driving their bike, and they were screaming. Do you remember that? And we looked at it, and we laughed, and we went, oh, my God, this is what it's like. So there was a very loud scream, which is like a siren, which is still going.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Right? And it's hard. You're right. You wake up. You have your oats because you love your oats, and the sun shines, but we're all screaming inside too at the same time. So there's a very strange dichotomy, right? And we're living through this hell, and we're watching people be brainwashed.
Yes. It's a question that I know a number of my friends were asking first under Trump and then during the pandemic as well. What is our job? To spread love, optimism, connection, sure. But is there and maybe the answer is no. Maybe that's our move, is to just be overtly positive and spread love. That's great. We need that. But does it shift your thinking about what you want people to feel after spending an hour and a half with you, after we've been through so much trauma? I mean, you have an opportunity to say anything to people from the stage. Did it make you think about the songs that you want to sing in any new light?
So I think that everybody really needs to do what comes naturally to them.
Yes.
So I will not judge the person who wants to say it and the person who doesn't want to say it. Yes. You have to go with your own sensibility. For me, I can't help it. I am a gusher, and I want to make people feel better. Yes. And so I'm not going to get political up there ever, because I feel like in an implicit way I am, in that I want there to be harmony. I want people to feel okay. And then there's stuff that's a lot worse than the politics, like the people who come up to me, and I won't forget it because it happened in this room. A woman, and she was young. She was in her 40s, and she was sitting there with her husband. And she was dying of cancer, and she has since died. And it was heartbreaking. And I sat with her after the show here, right by the door. And she said, for an hour and a half, you made me forget that I had cancer. Is there anything more meaningful than that? That if you can help somebody who's on their way out, right? As, it's not just that. Sure. It's not always, sometimes it's just somebody had a bad day.
Absolutely.
Or somebody maybe had a good day and they just want to fly with you. Yeah. But to connect with people on such a profound and human level is so meaningful to me. I mean, that is my fuel. I've always wanted to make people feel better. I've always been that person who, if there was agitation in my family as a kid, and there was plenty of it, I was the one who would go, no, wait, no, but please come back. I was always trying to put the Band-Aid on for people. I was always trying to help people in that emotionally.
Yes.
Right? And it's just how I am. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just how I am. I want people to be okay. And if I can sing to them and make them forget the world. But I'll tell you what's weird, okay? What's weird is that when people who are people with whom I do not see eye to eye, but they come to the gig, I think, how is it you're even at my gig? Like, can't you see that I'm this squishy, love-spreading Democrat. That I don't even know really. I'm stumped here. I don't know what to say. And maybe that's a lesson for me too, that, how there's that cliche about we have more in common than we don't.
Yes.
And maybe we do, because maybe they are every bit as squishy as I am.
Can I chip in?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. Come sit here. Come over here really close, because we are close.
Yes.
I'll chip in. Yeah. If you've got people with whom you don't identify politically coming to your show, but obviously getting something out of it, that's because you're doing it the right way, and you're doing your job, because what your music speaks to are the universalities of life, which is that we're all on this planet together, and we're all on a journey, and we're all going to leave at some point. And, that journey inevitably involves a mixture of joy and pain, and music is one of those things that allows you to experience those emotions vicariously through a purely kind of set of abstract cues, which is what music is. It can trigger deep feelings of pain, deep feelings of joy, without there being an object, a cause of that, other than sounds coming from the stage that evoke memories, that evoke feelings, and so on. And it's a safe space in which to kind of go on that emotional journey.
So many thoughts, but I'll respond to the last one, that it's a safe space, right? Because actually that may be something completely independent of any political ideology that we all need and crave and lack, is a space in which to feel these emotions, which are present with all of us, but we don't know how to confront them.
Because we go through life of necessity most of the time, suppressing these feelings, because that's how you function in the world.
Yes.
You can't go through life feeling everything
all the time
at a heightened level all the time. But, in a room where music is being played and you're surrounded by people, you're doing it in public as well. That's a very special thing about music.
I thought about the two of you, knowing that I saw your matinee show, and we are now in your pause, also processing complex ideas and emotions, strong emotions together. And now, in the space of a half an hour, you're going to go back out on stage and do it again. Like lightning rods, have to absorb these emotions and then share them again, which as performers we do, but some of us do it, I think, more acutely than others, and you have to show up in that emotion again and again and again.
But it's kind of easy. The image that comes to my mind, because everything is visual, everything is cinematic. Every time I sing a song, by the way, it's so cinematic. I see it.
You see it.
Right? But when you said that, it reminded me of Awakenings.
Yes.
Oliver Sacks, right?
Yes.
And you know how you touch a person who's got, I don't remember what the disease is called, but you touch a person and then they start to move again, right? That's how I feel musically. I am, and you touched on something, Jimmy, because, I'm not a hugely dramatic person, but I am intensely emotional, but in a more quiet way. And that's a very emotional thing that goes on the stage. And all I need is like just this tiny, tap on the shoulder, like an Alexander technique, and I'm off. And that's happening for me harmonically. I mean, I'm right next to those piano strings, and they are sending out such a strong message, such a strong force of Mother Nature. And
no, you said it from the stage. I love being in the middle of all of these overtones you said. Yeah.
And that's true.
Yeah.
And so I feel that, and away I go.
Yeah.
So there's something else, not to touch on it too much, but that thing about feeling safe.
Yeah.
So I grew up not feeling very safe.
Yeah.
If we're, just
going there,
sharing a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I think making people feel safe is very important to me. And when I said Jim saved me, I mean, Jim did kind of save me and made me feel safe and secure in a way that I did not grow up feeling. And so I really aim to be there myself, be there with Jim, and make other people feel that. It's safe to feel, just feel. But the word safe it's complex. There's a lot to this. But yes, it's a place where we're not here.
Yeah.
We're not in this world. Like I think I said up there, it's not Friday, you know.
Yeah.
It's just where we're suspended in air.
Yeah.
And that's what music does for me, and
Yeah.
I want to share that.
Yes.
And the thing about feeling safe right now is a profound question, because we're suffering in America.
We're suffering in the world. You know, I have an 11-year-old daughter, and I think I'm so happy to see her flourish and thrive. And I also, as my mother says, I'm so sorry that you have to live in this world right now, and that this is the world that's here for you. It is not a safe world on so many levels, and it's a strange time to be the father of a child, you know?
Yeah.
But I love sitting in these kinds of emotions. I mean, I tend to be attracted to it, but I also want to, as an artistic commentary, tell you something I have felt in the last few days listening to your music and then seeing you today, which is I feel that there's so much strong identity coming from the two of you, just embracing what it is that you do, not being fixated on what it isn't, and really leaning into what you do, that it's inspiring. It reminds me to give myself permission to explore the things that I do and find the things that you do uniquely and develop those. You know, listening to all these records and seeing how you found what your sound, you know, and then it's like this pool that you get to swim in then. It's really inspiring to be reminded that that's our job, to identify who we are and then play within that.
Thank you for saying that. I think that even though I said I grew up in an unsafe place, I think I had this self-confidence.
Yeah.
I was a strange mix of not very confident at all to extremely confident in that I knew who I was.
Yeah.
And I was vulnerable, but I was okay about feeling vulnerable. My voice and what I could do with my voice was something that I understood in the same way. You know, I just wasn't shy about it. This is how I'm built, right? This is the apparatus that I have.
Yes.
Right? I'm 5'5". I'm, you know, small. My fingernails are small. I'm so girly in so many of my sort of physical attributes. You know, my shoulders are small. I'm small, and so, you know, I don't have this big belt of a voice because look how I'm built. You know, I'm this tiny kind of thing compared to some people out there. I know that, and I produce a particular sound compared to, let's say, like in my field, you know, there's this thing about belting it out, right? But if you watch Nat King Cole on TV, and his mouth is just this cave. It's just gorgeous, and it's this big, right? And so he has a particular resonance. And I'm this big, and I have this resonance. And I felt very confident about the fact that I sound the way I sound, in the same way that a violin sounds different from a viola, sounds different from a cello. I never tried to be something that I wasn't, is what I'm trying to say. I think knowing that is very important.
Huge.
And so I don't try and pretend to be something that I'm not. I still work on my voice. I still want it to be a good resonant voice. But I know the instrument that I am. And so I don't feel anything other than confident that I have to deliver between the physical person that I am, the instrument that I physically actually am, and also the sensibility that I am.
Right, and over time they coalesce, right? They become part of the same thing.
Exactly. And the thing you said about, you know, when you start your career and you're being playful and you're doing things, but you're also kind of limited. One thing I want to say that's very important about the Tomlinson and Ishiguro pivotal moment. So I grew up listening to the American Songbook, and I sang the American Songbook, and I loved it. But I also felt like there was an itch that I needed to scratch. I knew that, which is to say that I felt a little bit locked in by the formula of 32 bars of me, then the instrumentalist played, and then 32 bars of me. And time after time, that felt very limiting. And so when they started to write for me, Tomlinson and Ishiguro, I said, look, the one thing I would love, because I'm such a word person, is to have a through-composed song. And let the music happen, let the improvisation happen, let it all happen, but almost let it happen like a passage of time. And that's what they did for me. And so it meant that when I sang one of their songs, and then I went and sang Under a Blanket of Blue, the power, the potency of those 32 bars suddenly just leapt off the page because it wasn't just formula after formula. So that was a real turning point for me as a singer, because I knew that I wanted a story, a lifetime of a story in 6 minutes. But I never wanted to leave the Great American Songbook. I just wanted more. And that's where we are today.
Stacey Kent, thank you for giving us more today. And Jim Tomlinson, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really a pleasure to get to spend some time with you.
And you. Thank you.
There they were, my friends, Stacey Kent and Jim Tomlinson. What a nice couple. What an interesting conversation. I'll be back again in your headspace before you know it. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.
I wish I could go traveling again.
This has been a WBGO Studios production. To learn more about WBGO Studios' award-winning podcasts, special concerts, live streams, and more, visit wbgo.org/studios.